Hey, how's it going, you guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be covering how to do an oil pan seal on a 2000 Toyota rav4. So for starters, the very first thing that we're going to want to do is try to create as much space as we can to be able to gain access to the oil pan itself. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to start off by lubricating the exhaust bolts here. And then we're going to remove these two bolts that you see going to the top of the exhaust manifold, and then we're gonna loosen up the two bolts going all the way to the back. So I'm doing this. Usually this tends to be area where the bolts tend to get a little bit rusted and dried out because of the heat and the exhaust. So just take your time, allow that thing to lubricate and really soak up the PB blaster before removing it. All right, cool. Now that we went ahead, soaked up the bolts, I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna use my breaker bar, use a 14 millimeter socket, and we're going to go ahead, start breaking the bolts from up top and then working our way to the back. All right, so once you loosen up the bolts, go ahead, start removing the upper ones completely. Uh, you- I'm doing this just because I do want it to hang down as you make your way to the back and you're starting to loosen up those final two bolts. Make sure that you have something or someone helping you support that exhaust. I was able to do it myself. It wasn't too tough. The exhaust pipe's not that heavy. You just want to make sure that you're not so focused on removing those two bolts back there that you forget about gravity. And of course, you don't want that to smash your foot or damage damage the component itself. So just be very careful with the removal here. Now, as you start moving this out of the way, you do want to pay attention to the gaskets. Unfortunately, the customer here didn't have enough money to swap out the gasket, so I had to be very careful with how I was removing it to make sure that I wasn't ripping it off its seats. As you can see, they're pretty burnt up front and back, but nonetheless, they did stay in position, so I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to keep them there to prevent an exhaust leak. All right, so next you're going to want to remove this plate here. There's 3 bolts um, that you'll find there. I believe the socket is a 12 millimeter. Nonetheless, you're going to want to remove those 3 bolts. Try to buy yourself as much space as you can with the oil pan here. As you're going to see throughout the video, um, the location of these 10 millimeter bolts and nuts are in a very tight, difficult space to get to. So you're going to want to, again, give yourself as much space as you can to work with. And as you see here, this is what we were working on trying to remove. Again, not an easy shot to get, not even with these meta glasses, but again, you got 3 bolts right there. We're gonna go ahead, put that off to the side. Okay, very simple step, but it's something very easy for you to skip by if you've never done an oil pan itself, and that's drain the oil. So I actually ended up doing an oil change on this when I saw the leak, and I ended up recommending it to the customer. They ended up taking off the car, coming back. Nonetheless, we're gonna go ahead, drain it, fill it up with fresh new oil once I'm actually done with the job here. But yeah, as you can see, we're gonna let that pan drain out of any fluid, make it easier, less of a mess, and we're gonna end up removing all, I think there was like 17 bolts. I think 2 of those being the actual nuts, but as you can see, once we get back here, this is where it's gonna get very, very tough. When you move to the passenger side, very simple, nothing to worry about. That's pretty easy. But getting back here, that's the challenge. I do appreciate the tech that allowed me to borrow a 10 millimeter swivel socket. It actually made it a million times easier to get to this specific area. So it's something that I will recommend. At this point, I wasn't necessarily using that socket. And again, I came across some difficulties even with torquing it down. So once I actually had that 10 millimeter swivel socket, I didn't need an extension, nothing besides that, and I was able to torque it down just fine. Highly recommend that. All right, once you loosen up all the bolts, you can go ahead, start using your power tools. Again, normally I like to break it by hand first. I just don't like the risk of potentially damaging a bolt. Even though I'm here in California, we don't really have that risk factor of like bolt seizing up. It's just one of those things you don't necessarily want to take a risk on a customer's car and create a bigger issue for yourself than what it should be. Nonetheless, if you have an extension, grab an extension. It's going to make this a bit easier, give yourself more space and reach to be able to get to these bolts. All right, and we're back. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to speed this part up now that you guys saw where those bolts are and me break it by hand. I'm going to grab my power tool. I'm going to zip them all off, and then from there, show you guys how to remove the oil pan. All right, from here, you're going to want to be very careful not to gouge the block. The pan, yeah, you can harm it and it's replaceable. You just don't want to do that to the other side of the surface. So be very careful. I'm using this tool that I bought from Amazon. Cost me about 13 bucks. You're gonna notice that there's not very much room um, for you to always use your hammer when it comes to using this tool, but play with the angles. Try to slide it in there as best as you can. Again, don't gouge anything. Be very patient. You're going to see me be very patient. I'm going to try different angles up until I'm able to just get that thing into the position that I want it to, and just start chipping away at that sill. And then I tend to not pry downward because again, I don't like seeing sharp objects going into the block itself. I would rather push upward and in where that tool is actually pulling the pan um, away from the block. You'll see what I'm talking about. It did take quite a bit to try to find the soft, proper angle on this thing, but once I got it in from that corner, I started hammering it to the side, removing as much of that old sealant as I could. And from here at this point, I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to grab my little handle that came with the tool. And as you are going to see, I'm going to pull that back towards me, which is going to pry downwards and away from the block. And then from here, you should just be able to pop that off. And again, the most important thing, most obvious important thing to any job is prepping up your surface, clean well. And that goes not just for the oil pan, but even for the block here, the bottom of the block. Very, very annoying. You're gonna see me use a razor blade at this point just to kind of knock off any thick remaining seal that was left over. I also use a scuff pad just to rough up and take off any minor, I would say, seals that was left behind. Be patient. Again, if there's any time or any point you want to dedicate to this job, as easy as it may seem, is prep, prep, prep. All right, so I think you guys get the idea. From this point out, I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna time lapse it, I'm gonna speed on through. I'll slow it down once I get to the scuff pad, but again, a majority of the work is being done by this razor. It's just that as you get to that very back edge that I was telling you about, things get very cramped up. It becomes difficult to even get this razor blade into position. And yeah, even though I drained the oil, this thing was still dripping oil on me. So just be mindful if you're doing this at home. You might want to have something that's gonna protect the floor from getting greased up. All right, and then from this point here, you're gonna want to grab a scuff pad and again just hit those edges. I'm using throttle body cleaner and I'm just making sure I'm trying to leave that surface as smooth as possible so that there's little to no chance of a leak being caused from the repair that I'm trying to make here. So just be very smart about and honest about how clean that surface is. I always tell my cousin, treat it like you're washing dishes. And of course, once you're done with prepping up that surface, the next thing is going to be laying down the brand new seal. Um, doesn't have to be very, very thick because as you place the seal in place, the gasket itself is going to spread out and you don't want it, spreading too much into the oil pan. Again, the goal is just to seal it. But as you're doing this, you don't need the tool that I have. It just makes it a lot more easier on the hands. And even then, I was still kind of fatiguing from doing this. But you're going to want to go on the very outer edge of the pan. And I better be careful when I say outer because when it comes to those bolt holes, that's where you really want to focus on going on the inside and then back towards the center of the oil pan as you see me doing here. And just be very mindful before you get to this step because this is a time process step. Once you get it on there, I know on TIS it was telling me that I had about 5 minutes to do it, but if you read the direction of the bottle, it gives me I think about I want to say 10 minutes or so, so you get a little bit extra time to get it up on there. Things that I've always experienced when removing these pans is that a little bit of oil tends to trickle down back to the surface of the lower block. So even when I end up laying this entire seal out, I always end up going back just making sure with a throttle body cleaner or brake cleaner that there's no oil on that surface because even if there's like a drip of it, you're still taking a risk of that leak continuing. So make sure it's dry and then try to work that up there as quickly as you can. You'll see me make a mistake because I was trying to, again, get it up on there pretty quick, but it wasn't too serious of a mistake. I did have to go back and just kind of rebead the surface area that I guess got, I want to say messed up, but not ruined. And then at this point, you're going to see me switch angles. Again, you can do this. It just made it a lot more easier from where I was standing at to feel like, okay, if I started back from my starting point and worked it back down to where I ended, it just felt like I would catch a better angle and actually see what I'm doing. Because you want to make sure that you lay the bead out thick enough to where you are making a seal. I've seen some people, go too thin, and then it's not sealing at all. So just be mindful. You want to find a happy medium here. All right, so like I said, you want to come back. Typically, the back of the block tends to be a little bit at an angle, so a majority of the oil tends to kind of seep on back there, but I'm going to go ahead, wipe it down as best as I can. Now again, this was a pretty tight squeeze for me, but I was able to catch the right angle and get it in. Again, when I was installing this, to the left of where those difficult bolts are, I did kind of smear a little bit, but nonetheless, it wasn't harmful to anything. I ended up getting it into position and then holding it. And again, I'm holding it up. I'm pressing it up because I don't want that oil to seep through the back of that motor again. And that's what I'm trying to prevent. So I'm getting the first nut on there. And then I'm going to start working my way from the back all the way around. But I do find it easy that once you get one of the nuts on one side, that you go ahead and you put on the other one just to help you hold it in place. And again, I'm putting pressure up on top, not excessive pressure, just enough to hold it up because I don't want um, the back to just have that bit of a drip. All right, so as you see here, again, once I got those two nuts in position and I was able to make sure that, there was no leak coming from the back, I went ahead immediately and started tightening the bolts from the rear by hand. All right, so when it comes to putting these bolts on, again, the very tough part is actually going to be on the inside of that oil pan closest to the transmission. If you have a 10 millimeter swivel socket, it made it way easier to get in there without having to use an extension or because I was even having a tough time with my swivel head getting back there. But nonetheless, I'm going to slow it down. The torque specs for these bolts, it's a 7-inch pound. All right, so for this part here, you're going to want to start off with both of the nuts, and you're going to want to torque it down to 76-inch pound. There is a torque sequence for this, so if you have access to it, I highly recommend follow your manual. If you're watching this video, you don't have a manual, you want to start off with the nut that you see me torquing down here, jump across to the second nut that there is, torque that down, come back to where I'm at, and then torque that down one last time, and then start working your way around the oil pan. Again, 76-inch pounds is what you're torquing it to. So as you guys saw, things get very tight and cramped up. It made it very tough for me to get to that one last bolt in the very back, but nonetheless, here goes the 10 millimeter swivel socket I was talking about. And again, that's something that you are going to want to invest in just for that one little corner there. It makes it way more easier to do it, but you're able to guarantee your job at the end of the day. All right, and we're gonna go ahead and put this 3 bolt plate back on. I remember when I removed this, I was like, why the heck do they even have this here? But it's there for a reason. Just make sure you torque it. The torque specs for this was 36 foot-pounds. All right, from here, we're gonna go ahead, install the exhaust back into position. Again, be very careful if you're not planning to swap out those gaskets. Try to get it in there without, disturbing too much. We're going to go ahead, we're going to torque this down to 36 foot-pounds as well. Okay, once you get to this point and everything's back in position, the one thing that you're going to want to do is allow this to cure for about 2 to 3 hours. If you can, leave it overnight, but here at the dealership, we got to move quick. So 2 hours is what I allowed this thing to cure. In the meantime, I went to lunch. I added some dye to the oil, to the engine oil. I filled it up and I started operating it, letting it run. And then right now with my black light, I'm just looking for any potential oil leaks. As you can see, things pretty sealed. It's covered. Nothing's leaking. That's exactly what you want out of this job.